my job, I do line and copy editing as my specialty. I look at the words you use to communicate that story.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Anna Clements, and this is Audiobooks with Anna, where we explore the fascinating world of audiobooks with industry experts. Dayna, welcome up to the sofa. Thank you so very much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, Anna. I am tickled pink that you would ask me to join you here. This is exciting.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled that you're here. I need to say out loud that you have been an absolute stalwart of this room and are always available to us when we go, so what actually happens when authors, and you're like, actually, just so you all know, and we are hugely grateful for that. And I thought it would be interesting for everybody to get a chance to find out more about you and about the work you do and what it is that the poor authors go through before we even meet them. So, yes, welcome everybody to the room. Thank you very much for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled to have Dayna with us today to talk to us about what she does, giving nothing away. So, Dayna, can you give us a brief overview of your life history up until now and explain kind of what you, maybe from high school, like how you managed to get in through the system and what was interesting to you in high school? Was this always going to be your progression in life?
You know, was this always going to be my progression? I'm not 100% sure about that. I was always a reader. And a lot of people who become authors or editors, like reading has been something we do for, since childhood. I did a lot of writing. I was on the school newspaper, and did well in, AP courses. And I was also involved with FFA, Future Farmers of America, and competed in public speaking events there and did fairly well. Never made it to nationals, but whatever. Got some good experience through that. And as a result, I went to college intending to be an agricultural education major. I was going to teach agriculture to kids. And along the way, I wasn't able to get into some of the classes I needed. My advisor, who could have signed off to force me into the classes, do the administration stuff, he was actually over in Moscow, so he couldn't sign the paperwork, and I was too ignorant to know to ask someone else to put me in those classes. So by the time I reached my senior year, I wound up with more credits in speech communication than I did in agricultural education. So I wound up changing my major.
I have to interrupt you here because I am fascinated by the fact that what ultimately feels like the universe, for want of a better word, putting something in place that allowed you not to be able to do the thing you were supposed to be doing, actually led you into the space that you've basically ended up in, words and wordsmithing. Do you think that was a conscious thing? I know at that kind of age, we're not very in tune, I don't think, with kind of the machinations of, I don't know, Mother Nature or a higher power. Did it feel, or did it just feel like a messy mess that actually just ended up working out perfectly?
At the time, it felt super messy. I wound up having to do an extra semester. My mother was not happy, but I was like, I'm the one paying for my school bills, so why are you upset? But that extra semester was actually a godsend because that is when I took a class in editing and proofreading. That's where I learned how to use style manuals like Chicago Manual of Style and the Associated Press style book. I learned proofreading marks. I learned how to read a text, as you're proofreading, how to compare and contrast and all that fun stuff. When I graduated, I didn't have a job. I had no idea how to turn a degree in communication arts and sciences into an actual living, career. Again, my mother wasn't happy, and that's a whole other conversation. But I eventually landed at a national advertising magazine as a proofreader. I was there for about 2 years until I got married. And my husband was working as he was in grad school and working days. I was working night shift. And so I looked for a job where I could be days. And my aunt saw an ad in her local weekly newspaper, sent it to me. I interviewed the day of our wedding rehearsal. I was offered the job that evening. I was so verklempt, I forgot to introduce everyone in the wedding party to each other. And a couple weeks later, one of my sisters was like, "So Dana, who was that person who walked me down the aisle? How was he connected?" So yeah, that was a little goofy, but that's when I got my position as a feature writer and photographer for a group of local weekly newspapers. And the first couple weeks, actually, I did a lot of copy editing, and throughout the 14 years I was with the paper, I did a lot of copy editing. And so when I started burning out, didn't realize I was in burnout, but when it got to a point where I was like, I need to change careers, this isn't working for me, I started retraining in fiction editing. And I opened up my business 2021, and I'm here now.
That's wonderful. I love the story of how people get to where they are, and it kind of almost feels like it's meant to be. You know, the hiccups and the confusion and the steps along the way all happen for a reason, and we can't see it at the time. You know, do you feel like you're in the right place?
Yes, I feel like this is a good place to be. I enjoy my work. I enjoy working with people. Um, the thing I loved about being the feature writer was I met so many new and different people and built relationships so that those new and different people became familiar, and some of them became good friends. And the paper I worked with always was focused on good news. So I got to go into schools and meet kids and see what's happening in education today. And I I got into so many different situations. Like, I can't tell you how many back pastures or barns I have been in. I've met people's their steers for their 4-H show. I've met people's bunnies. I've met their kids. I've met grandparents. I've interviewed a couple centenarians on the occasion of their birthday. So I get to see people and I get to hear their stories. And I think that's what I really like. That's what's really translated over into what I'm doing now. I get to meet people, authors, narrators, other editors, and I get to hear stories, whether it's the personal stories of the people who are in this industry, and I get to see the stories that they are creating. And I love that.
Yeah, I love that for you. We are all, as you know, we are all about the stories here. Yeah, I think everybody, the one thing that sort of ties us all together is our love of stories. May I ask you why and how romance specific, and how specific are you in romance? I know your website, I've put a link to your website at the top of the page for anybody who wants to take a look. But your website is actually very kind of, it's just very inclusive. I love the colors, by the way. And I'm desperate to know how you came up with Your Publishing BFF.
Okay. So when I launched my business, I looked at the um, names of other people in the editorial space and was like, okay, what words will pop when people search? So my husband is co-owner with me on this business because I was like, if something happens to me, that will give him easy access to, finances and whatnot. So I went with True Love Editorial Services. And I had this cheesy thing about true love is partnering with your spouse, or it's working really hard and whatnot. I was just like, yeah. So did some coaching with another editor, and I like offering editorial services, but I want to do more. That I'm more of a relationship person, and I didn't feel like True Love Editorial Services really reflected that. As your publishing BFF, your best friend forever, um, I I want to provide wraparound services. And I don't think I do this, I don't think I communicate this well on my website, and I need to work on that. But my idea is, yes, send me your document for copy editing. Send me, have me look at your website and whatnot. But, I will do that work for you, but I will also build a relationship with you. I will check in with you. I will make sure that after I do the work for you, that I don't just abandon you. Like, I'm if you want me to be part of your team of service providers, I will be an active member of that team. And I will make sure that you have the resources you need to succeed in this business. And a lot of times, when I say resources like that, a lot of times that means being able to look for answers to questions that are valid, that are trustworthy. And I know authors can get really overwhelmed with all of the information out there. And I'm able to look at some sites and be like, okay, yes, I know these people, these are trustworthy, or I'm not sure about these, let's skip that information. Here's the link to the answer you need. Can I help you do whatever it is to get this done?
I love that. It does feel like a full service, relationship that you supply. And I want to talk more about the list I have here is basically about the different types of editing, which I think would interest a lot of narrators as well, because we talk a lot here about rewriting demos and writing our bios. And I know that's something you also work with people on. But I am apologize for going down this route because it's really personal to me. But I'm aware that on your website, there's a section that talks about the fact that you have a short story in an anthology published. Congratulations. But you also speak on your website of a novel that you've written that's permanently in revision. As someone who's also writing a book that I am afraid to put out, did you put that on your website because you understand where authors are coming from and actually how hard the process is? Would you like to get that book out? Is that something that's on there but has no intention really of ever becoming a thing? Is that something you're willing to talk about?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything, Anna. So in 2018, I had gotten back into reading and was voraciously reading. And I started getting annoyed that at that point there was not much representation. There wasn't much. The books I was reading, and I read romance. I've always been interested in romance. Cozy mysteries are fun, and children's books. Like, I am a child at heart, and I love kids books. So naturally, I work with those. Well, at that point, I was pretty much reading romance exclusively, and realized that all the heroines were, socially attractive. And I was annoyed that there were very few heroines who represented who I understood myself to be at the time. And so I was like, okay, I'll write a book, and started. And I'm great with beginnings. I can get a story started, and then about 1,000 words in, I peter out, because my experience for 14 years was taking an hour long interview, all that information I gleaned, and winnowing it down to 500 words. Writing an entire novel of, like, taking an idea of maybe 500 words and blowing it up into 80,000 to 100,000 words. Whew, that is something totally different. And so I have this novel. I did finally, like, write a whole story, and it has been through developmental editing, and I can explain about that. But I've lost my enthusiasm for it because it's it's boring. Honestly, it is a boring book, and I'm at a loss as to how to make it more interesting because I think I think it's a little the characters are not where I'd like them to be. And I think part of that is because it's a little bit of a self-insert story. And so I don't think I'm necessarily the most interesting person. And so I think my characters are not that interesting as a result. Um, but yeah, like there are people who have written novels that have taken them 20 years to write. And, I tell those people that's okay. Hey, you finished it. Like that is an accomplishment. It's not a competition between who can write the fastest. You know, in some sense, it is when you want to take up a lot of space in the publishing sphere. Having a lot of books in your backlist is valuable, but on a book by book basis, like you wrote a book, like just sit in that. That's amazing. It might be the first draft, but you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like that's awesome. Like celebrate that. I'm all about the celebrations, by the way. That's part of being a publishing BFF.
Absolutely. And you're so right. Sometimes I think I am very aware within the industry, particularly the more people I work with, that the idea of productivity being about numbers you can count or things you can actually say you've done and got over and moved on from is becoming almost a barrier to actually starting. And it upsets me that the idea of ongoing creativity isn't more celebrated. And the idea of, shifting our viewpoint or changing our lane because we've learnt new things or made different decisions or want to learn more before we continue. I wish that was celebrated more. But that's a conversation for another day. Talk to us then, Dayna, about the different types of editing. I don't even know where to start with this, so over to you on a general overview of how editing even works for those poor authors who come to you with their baby. Because I'm aware as a creative, I'm afraid, and I say this with all vulnerability, to hand over my work to have somebody else cross red pens through it and write this isn't good enough 1 out of 10. It's a throwback to school, but I really don't know how people set up that relationship with you. And I'm assuming there must be some amount of kindness on your part that allows them to be vulnerable with you.
Well, let me first say, Anna, that the right editor, like most of us, or at least the professionals who I know, are not judging your work. We are not grading your work. We are not assigning a numerical value to how well you did. Our goal is to help you uncover the story that you had in your mind. So I do have a blog post on my website, and I can hunt up that link later. In traditional editing, there are a number of steps. But first, we have to define some of these terms. So when we say an editor, like an editor with, you know, Hachette, we're usually talking about an acquisitions editor, somebody who is pitched a story by an agent, and I want this. Let's do this, and then that person or maybe their assistant will read the whole manuscript and make suggestions to clarify some of the what's going on in the story. They will um, do what's called a developmental edit. They will develop the story. They will see that yes, this is a diamond in the rough. Maybe if you rewrite, these chapters in this perspective or to bring out this plot line, they have that vision for the book that will sell, and they work with the author to develop that vision.
Wonderful. So talk to us then about how editing works, what the different kinds are, because I'm pretty sure that, like me, until I met you, I had no idea that there were different kinds and that there were different sorts. So do talk us through that.
So when so in freelance editing, we don't have the acquisitions editor, obviously, because freelancers like me, like we are not publishing houses, but we will do those tasks that some of the acquisition editors do, like we will do developmental editing. We will work on the story that you are writing, make sure that things like the setting, the world building, character arcs, make sure that those are all part of the story that you are telling. Make sure that if you intend to write a cozy mystery, you aren't actually writing a self-help book. Make sure you fit the genre expectations. So that's the content. People like my job, I do line and copy editing as my specialty. I look at the words you use to communicate that story. So I will follow along and make sure, there aren't any plot threads that are left loose in the manuscript, but I will also look at, okay, you wrote that he shoved his fingers through his hair 15 times. Would you maybe want to find a different way to either describe what he's doing or find a different action to kind of vary things up because readers can get tired by that repetition?
I love that idea of that overall awareness, that consciousness, like stepping in from the outside and seeing the book as a whole, which we as narrators do, of course. When we're handed books that haven't necessarily had that eye on them, it does become very aware when an author has a favorite phrase or a particular set of words that they like to use, and then they drop them in everywhere, and you're just like, really, really.
Like, how many times can a person actually murmur? you know? Um, and what's interesting too is when you read a lot, either as narration or, listening to audiobooks or reading with your eyes, it is so interesting to see what phrases pop up across the genre. So, like, I specialize in romance. So, the word palpable is going to show up in your manuscript almost invariably. Saying something like "yep" and popping the P at the end is going to show up. If they're kissing, it's something about the seam of their lips. Like, um, and it's kind of funny if you go on Reddit in some of the book communities, you can see where readers have said, "Oh, this is my pet peeve. I hate when this phrase shows up or that phrase." And then, of course, once you have read that, you can never unsee it. So, apologies there. But yeah, I'm autistic and have ADHD. And one of the parts of my autism that I'm realizing is that I can recognize patterns pretty easily. And so like seeing the frequency of these phrases and how they stand out, apparently to other people they might not especially, but they do to me. And so I figure, hey, that's something I can remark on to an author, whether they, care about it or not. Okay, so line and copy editing is working on the words you tell the story, also spelling, grammar, punctuation, that kind of stuff. And then we have proofreading. Now, typically in the publishing world, like in-house, proofreading is reading the proofs. A proof copy is when the text has been laid out in the format that it's going to be printed. So when I worked for the magazine, the advertising magazine, like every Friday when we went to print, we made what were called dummy books. So like we had a proof of the magazine and we had to make sure that we had the right ad copy in, like the final ad. We had to make sure that none of the coupons backed up. Like we had to proofread the copy. So now with indie publishing, self-publishing, we don't have that as much. Copy editing and proofreading have kind of merged into one, especially because a lot of self-publishing authors don't have the money it takes to hire someone to do those tasks. So they'll usually go with just a copy edit or a proofread, or some people call it a proof edit, I think. Ideally, it would be we would get to see the book after it's been saved as an EPUB or as I guess, a PDF of like an InDesign file to see how it's laid out on the page. And that's where you get into such fun things as ladders and widows and orphans and rivers and things that's super technical that we really don't worry about these days, unless you really want to be persnickety, and that I appreciate persnicketyness, but it that's more of a thing, an in-house thing. I think it's not with genre books like romance or cozy mystery.
Thank you. No, that's great. So I'm starting to feel sorry for authors because I think I understood that it was a kind of a, I was going to say a crime of passion, and now I can't think of anything else. It's a labor of love, isn't it? It's an absolute. We all have authors that we work with who appear to churn out books, but the majority of indie authors I've spoken to have really suffered over creating their work and love it to within an inch of its life. And those are the people I adore because they usually have a cast of characters. They've got pages of information to give you about how their character came about and why they thought certain things. So they have spent so much time collating information and gathering, resources that they can then give us as narrators, that it's really helpful. But I'm aware now that the process of handing over your work to so many people before it even gets to the idea of an audiobook, just to make it into a book, is enormous. And I'm really conscious then of how an author would go about finding somebody that they can trust, somebody that they can feel vulnerable with. Do you find that most authors come to you through word of mouth? Is it very much that sort of tactile feeling of I can trust you because my friend trusted you? Or are there places people go to sort of that they belong to that allows them to find other people that can work as a team with them on their projects?
So, okay, you brought up like five different things, and I have five
I'm
different
so
thoughts.
sorry. And I must apologize because for
No,
some
it's
reason
okay.
today I'm asking like question after question. I'm like, poor Dana, I don't know what's happened to me.
This is great. I love your questions, Anna. Like you ask the best questions. So, first off, some people write quickly, some people are slow writers. Some people can spend like sometimes some people are full-time writers. They can spend, 40, 60 hours a week writing. Other people find 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. It's not, again, it's not a competition. The people who can do this full time, they have as much dedication as the person who has to wedge it in between, working a day job. And so, yeah, I try to encourage people not to compare um, the lifestyles of the authors, or how the books come about. Some people do a lot of background research into their characters. There are so many different tools out there to determine who your characters are and how they're going to behave in the situations you put them in. Some people don't need that. Some people plot their stories. They know what's going to happen from beginning to end. Some people are pants their stories. They fly by the seat of their pants, and they have an idea of the plot. They have an idea of some of the situations they want to put their characters in, but they just write and they see what happens. Neither way is wrong. Neither way is right. They just are. Okay, so that's the whole like writing part. The how do you find someone you trust? The really great thing about now is social media. So a lot of editors have a presence on social media, and I recommend, like, if you're looking for an editor, check what they post on social media. Check what they put on their timeline, but also check their comments to other people. Like, are their comments kind and thoughtful, or are they like more sharp? And yes, like, that's maybe not the greatest. I struggle with this because when I am editing, I try to be as kind and encouraging as I can while also being truthful. And sometimes I don't do that on social media. So, um, yes, look at how they're represented on socials, and then double check, like,
I think you're
interview them.
absolutely right, because I think it's a bit like finding a coach with regards to, narration coaching. You have to be able to get on with that person. It is a relationship, isn't it? So if the person is writing in a style that you wouldn't want to be spoken to, then they're probably not the person for you.
Right. And you can meet with these people. Like, I recommend asking to meet with someone, get to know them a little bit, take them up on their free 15-minute, Zoom call, give them a sample of your work so that they can see what you have written, make sure that it's something they feel comfortable working with. But then you can also see how they comment or how they write feedback. You can also ask around, like ask other authors, say, hey, I really like your book looked great. Did you have help producing your book? And they might say, yeah, my copy editor was awesome. I have credited them on my copyright page, so you can look there. Or they might say, yeah, they were great, but I had to decline a lot of their suggestions. So yeah, you could maybe consider them, but maybe your second or third choice. So you can take those things into consideration. If you don't have friends that you can ask, and you aren't great with social media, there are professional organizations that you can check with. In the United States, we have a number of orgs. We have some small ones like the Professional Editors Network, the Pacific Northwest Editors Group, which has actually expanded to include more of the US. We have the big group is the Editorial Freelancers Association and ACES, the Society for Editing. I'm a member of both of those. I'm on the board of the EFA, the Editorial Freelancers Association. We do not evaluate our members. So you can have great members, like great editors who have membership in our organizations. You can have bad, like not so great editors who are members. But being a member exposes us to a lot of education at that's either free or lower cost than somebody who's not a member can have. So that's a really big selling point for joining our group, because I don't know about narrators, but I am constantly training. I am constantly learning. It is a rare week that I don't have something on my calendar from ACES or the EFA or some of the other publishing organizations I'm involved with. And I figure that all that training helps me be better at my job so I can help authors be better at their jobs. There are also, if you want somebody though who has been evaluated, the CIEP, the how is it, Chartered Institute of for Editing and Proofreading, is in the UK, but it's an international group, so there are United States and Canadian members who are involved. The CIEP actually has ranked membership, so you have to have a certain amount of experience, a certain number of continuing education credits. Like, they are very, I think you have to pass some testing too. So they are very much all about the skills assurances. So if you want something like that, look for someone on their directory versus the EFA or ACES.
Well, I went to the stand of the CIEP, the Chartered Institute for Editing and Proofreading, at the London Book Fair because of all the stands, they were kind of empty and talking amongst themselves. And I thought I'd go over and say, hello, what do you do? And what do I do if I'm looking for an editor and proofreader? Unfortunately, they got so excited that I came up to their stand because they thought I wanted to talk to them about becoming an editor or proofreader, that they sent me away saying, "Oh yeah, go to our website. There's a list there. It'll be fine." It was like I think I disappointed them because but they were lovely people and super interesting in the fact that they were actually the only entity I found there where they seemed to be a very organized system of editors and proofreaders with regards to you being able to go and say, is this person trustworthy? So if you don't have any word of mouth advice or any friend who's used someone, it is a good place to go and sort of feel like you can trust that business person or take their word for it, as it were. Talk to us then about other things you belong to, because I know you are very involved in romance writers, some of the award things going on. Talk to us a bit about that.
Sure. So, the big project on my plate right now is I am the chair of the Contemporary Romance Writers Virtual Writing Conference. So, somehow we don't have a committee this year, so another gal and I are organizing this. I was kind of surprised to find that out that I was the chair of the event because I thought I was her co-chair, but no, she was informed me that since she is running the Stiletto Awards, which are the Contemporary Romance Writers groups, it's our writing contest. No, I was chairing the conference. So we have a great lineup of people who have signed on to present this. I'm super excited. We have Kilby Blades doing the masterclass on July 26th. We have Emma, Clean Reads Queen. Emma, she is putting together a panel of audiobook narrators to talk about the stuff that they specialize in. We have another team of narrators who are going to be reading excerpts from the winners of the Stiletto Awards. So that's new this year. I'm hoping it goes over well because I'm like, we talk about narration at conferences, but I don't know how many actually show to authors what audiobook narrators can do. So I'm all about highlighting what audio sounds like. It's really funny, Anna. I love audiobooks. I don't listen to audiobooks. And here's why. My brain is such that I read so much faster with my eyes, and I have an auditory processing issue that when I listen to audiobooks at regular speed, I lose track of what I'm hearing. And if I speed it up, I can't distinguish the words well enough for my brain to understand. So I feel like the greatest hypocrite, but I love the concept of audiobooks. I have listened to them like on trips I can manage, but if I am trying to like cook and listen to an audiobook, I struggle. It is the weirdest thing. It's frustrating, but I do have great memories of listening to books on tape when I was a child, and I know how much that was foundational to my literacy, and I want those opportunities for other people to have. And I want more people to be part of publishing because this is a great industry. Bringing stories and education to people, making it more accessible is just like, it's the best thing ever. So, what was your question again?
No, yes, I just want to say, please don't feel the need to apologize at all because it is all about accessibility and whatever works for you. So I am aware that you are always supporting us, and I don't think your ability or your willingness to listen to audiobooks actually excludes you from the group. You'll be glad to hear. So we still adore you, Dayna.
I've heard people argue, oh, audiobooks isn't reading. And my thought is, okay, some people read with their eyes, some people read with their fingertips if they're reading Braille, some people read with their ears. Like any way that you do it, you are putting words into your brain, you're putting concepts, and you're feeding the imagination. How you take in those words should not be a status symbol, should not be a competition. We should be encouraging people to read however suits them best. And I will die on that hill.
I think, Sarah has said in the chat that she thinks that saying audiobooks isn't reading is a very ableist statement. And I think it is. Ultimately, it's all about getting authors' words out to everybody, however that is. I've been doing a lot of research into aphantasia at the moment, which is the inability to see images in your head when you close your eyes. It turns out that my mind's eye is blind, in inverted commas. And I've been fascinated by going down rabbit holes of people talking about what it means if you don't see in your head, and how the implication when you have this conversation with your families or around the kitchen table. I'm fascinated by the responses I'm getting from people I ask it of, and how different. If you Google aphantasia, you get like a ranking of darkness through to full 3D images, and people will pick a particular picture, and everybody seems to be different. And I think we're less aware than we ought to be of how very different we all are. And we're all so busy trying to make each other the same that we're not allowing space for difference, which is so important. But moving swiftly on. Going on then from your contemporary romance writers, you hope that's a huge success for you. And they do have a committee, it's you. And good luck with that. Uh,
Right.
and lovely that the Stiletto Awards are now including more narration and sort of examples of how those would sound, the winners, for example. Talk to us about independent author conferences and whether you have any advice for narrators wanting to approach authors or investigate, independent author production of audiobooks. Do you have any advice for narrators?
Sure. So the first year I was in business, I attended 6 conferences, and the only way I was able to do that is because of virtual, right? There are a few conferences I have returned to. There are some that I've decided they weren't so great for me. Um, I have not, okay, so this is my 4th year in business. I don't know that I have landed any clients from attending conferences. However, I have built some good relationships with authors and editors who have been at these conferences. So if you go in thinking, okay, I'm going to land X number of clients, and I'm going to make X number of dollars, I think that's the wrong way to approach them. If you go in instead with an attitude of, okay, I want to learn about this genre so I can communicate well with authors and other, and service providers. And if you say, go in with an attitude of, I want to build relationships, I want to get to know who's involved in this genre, I think you'll be much better off. There are a lot of organizations that host conferences. Okay, so I'm coordinating the CRW conference. I'm also on the planning committee for the Northern Hearts Conference, which is Toronto romance writers, their writing conference, which is in the fall. It's also virtual. The thing you will learn by going to these smaller conferences like NHC is I feel like each conference has its own personality. And you get to see different perspectives, different ways of doing the same thing. And I think that can influence how you do what you do. Because I think some of us it's easy to say, okay, this is what I know, this is how I've been taught, so I'm going to do it this way. But when you attend things like conferences or workshops with other people, when you hear other voices, when you are exposed to different formats and different types of schedules, then it's like, oh, huh, well, if they're doing X one way and I've been doing X this other way, huh, well, maybe I could try it that way. Maybe I could see how, I've been doing my thing the same way all the time. What if I change it up? Like, never occurred to me that I could change it up, but if they change something over here and they're doing it great, well, maybe I could experiment a little bit. And I think it helps us become better people as well as better service providers, better industry professionals, if that makes sense.
It really does. Absolutely. Yes, I am hugely in agreement. It is all about the relationships and about seeing things from new angles that allow us fresh perspectives. For me, that's what going to the conferences is about, sort of discovering how everybody does the same thing differently, which is exactly what you said. Joan says it's an opportunity for benchmarking as well as relationship development, which I love. It is. It's about seeing how what everybody's up to and how they're doing it. I only have one last question left, so I'm just going to open. You have any thoughts you'd like to put in the chat, please do. Before I ask my last question, I must ask whether you have a favorite emoji.
Purple heart.
Yes.
I well, okay, so like the heart is because like love, and purple because it's my favorite color. It has nothing whatsoever to do with wounded soldiers. I apologize to those who use it specifically for that. No, purple heart is just that's my signature. If I may say one other thing about conferences, when attending audiobook narrators at author conferences are pretty rare, but then also editors at author conferences are pretty rare. And the way I look at it is I am learning how authors tick. I am learning about what they're interested in, what concerns them. I am learning accounting and business practices that I can adapt to my business. I am hopefully using some of the things that I learn about how authors think and what concerns them. I'm hopefully applying that to my business to appeal to them to help, solve those issues. But yeah, it's like how else are you going to interact with authors where you can actually like talk to them face to face, chat with them in the chat during sessions, like yeah, they're just great opportunities, and a lot of them are fairly inexpensive if you're a member of their group. Like with the contemporary romance writers, attendance at our conference is free as long as you're a member, and membership is only $40 for a year, which is huge. Like it's not a huge amount of money; it's a huge value because of all the classes that you can take, all the free programs throughout the year. So yeah, just kind of explore. And hey, if you're one of the only narrators in that space, if you're the only narrator in that space, when people need a narrator, they're going to know your name. They aren't going to know everybody else's name because they haven't met them. But hey, they met you, so who knows? Maybe they'll reach out to you, when they're ready to talk narration. It's something to think about.
I think it's important to, you said about finding out how authors tick. And I think it just allows us to be more empathic and more in tune with their world, which allows us to appreciate what it is they're giving us and the joy of granting us these words that we don't have to memorize like we do on stage is such a different and such a lovely way to earn a living. I think it's a lovely way for us to express our gratitude as well to them in sharing ultimately two different but very similar creative endeavors that hopefully with the teamwork create some beautiful projects. You're absolutely right, Dana, as always. I must just ask then, as a kind of selfish narrator focused idea, I'm talking a lot at the moment with people about rewriting scenes to create demos, because often it'll take 3 or 4 pages for a particular love scene or a particular car chase to take place and finish. And we're having to learn to abridge them or to change them. Is there a single tip? This is a terrible question. Is there a single tip that you could give, editing wise, that would allow us to look at copy differently? Is there something that you feel you could grant us or share with us that might make us look at writing differently?
Sure, I've been thinking about this for the last like 24 hours. What's the goal of the scene? Like what is happening in this scene? What is all of this nonsense comes to mind. That is not the right word. What is all of this activity or thought or conversation about? what about the scene attracted you to it? And what is pushing the story forward in this scene? So if you have a big car chase and, okay, so The Italian Job immediately flashes to mind. It's my favorite car chase movie. So you have the Mini Coopers, and maybe your author has gone into great detail about the Mini Cooper, and they're shifting gears and they take a left at this street, and the lights turn them, steer them in that direction. And okay, so the point here is that you're trying to get the cars from point A to point B while distracting the bad guys, right? So you don't have to read all the detail about the leather in the car, the leather seats, and the feel of, the rumble of the engine as they shift gears. You can summarize that to say, you know, they raced down the streets of Los Angeles, turning with the lights, following the path that their buddy who's hacked into the light control system has laid out for them. And so you've taken out several paragraphs, maybe a page or two, of driving sensations. And you've allowed your excerpt to get right to maybe it's the conversation they have that's really important in this scene. So, maybe they've driven down this race down the streets of Los Angeles, and in their headset, they've had this conversation. And so you can spend your time on the conversation and showing your voices, your dialects or accents, as Steve talked about yesterday. Focus on the important stuff and summarize the not so important stuff.
So it's almost focusing on the action and summarizing the detail, because the detail, when you're reading the book, is exciting and lovely, but actually in a demo, we've only got 2.5, 3 minutes. There's no time. So yeah, no, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Thank you. Dayna, is there any last thoughts that you'd like to leave us with? Anything I didn't think to ask you, or that you'd like to mention, that you'd like to bring?
Sure. I love working on websites. So if you have your personal website and you want somebody to take a look at it, am I showcasing, like, what's the arrangement? Is it easy to navigate? Like that kind of thing. I love reviewing websites like that because I want audiobook narrators. I know, like editors, your website is a reflection of yourself and the work that you want to do. And if it's not, if your site isn't accessible, if it isn't organized well, if it doesn't, quote, look professional, you might be hurting your chances. So if you want somebody to take a look, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to say, on first glance, yeah, it could use some help. Would you like to work together? Or be like, I don't think I could improve on that. That's great. Um, so and if you have any other questions about editing or writing or anything related, feel free to reach out. If I don't know, I will refer you to someone who does.
I love
That's
that.
what a BFF does.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much. You are living your business ethos. So thank you for that. That was fantastic. Dayna, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Today we talked to Dayna, Your Publishing BFF, somebody I think of as our editor in residence, and for whom I'm very, very grateful. My takeaways: Dayna's fabulous, as we knew, and I think she could not have been more clear about, if you have any questions, reach out. She's involved in too many things, has too many fingers in too many pies, not to know the answer or to know somebody who does. Thank you, as always, Dayna, for being incredibly wise and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you very much to everybody who listened in today. Dayna, for joining us on the sofa. Thank you for those who participated in the chat. It's always lovely to read your comments. It's been a great conversation. I'm so glad I asked you. And yes, do make sure to have a wonderful week, everyone. Let's go out and be our favourite selves.